All right, good morning, Doc D. So this is for Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. So today I'm going to finish off our lecture. We were talking about cross-functional process maps or cross-functional or otherwise known as swim lane diagram. And so I'm going to cover back on this for just a few seconds to kind of get you right back in the right frame of mind, and then we're going to talk about the flow chart. And so, got I don't know 10 slides or so to talk through, and all this material is actually testable, and so please do take notes. And after I get done with the flowchart lecture, I will go right into a short review for what you can expect to see on the quiz on Friday or Monday, depending upon weather. So here we go. All right, so we've been talking about the cross-functional process map. And so, we've got functions, we got processes, and we have activities. And so to kind of focus in here, here we've got so the customer going across the boundary, which is established here at the basically at the front counter. This is not a restaurant. This is a manufacturing facility, but same different thing, right? So we've got the boundary set up here, which keeps the customer separated from the inside aspects of our business. And so they place this inner order, right? And so this inner order is represented here on the cross-functional process map as just a single entity, right? And so flowcharts are going to help us then look at further detail in that inter-order aspect of it. All right, so let's see, let's go to... All right, so shoot, I was one ahead of myself. That's all right. So anyhow, so we've talked about original topic of conversation was the contact diagram, which gives the scope of the system and its interaction with the environment. The swim lane diagram, which shows the path of workflow. We'll talk about the flow chart next, and then the final diagram that we'll talk about is state diagram, and I'll get into that next week. And then we're going to talk about a lot of other things that I find of a particular interest. So, oh, by the way, you should memorize this slide. Back up. All right, so we're going to do the flow chart for that inter-order activity, right? Well, so here we go. All right. So flowcharts show the sequence of steps in a process, activity, or operation. All right. And so there are four basic symbols that we utilize. So we have an action or a task, something that needs to be done. All right, which is represented by the square or the, well, not necessarily a square, a rectangle. Oops, dang it. Come on. We have a start and an end. All right. And so, it's very rare to have a process that just keeps running that doesn't have a start or an end, right? Everything has a start, and even though we might have a process that's going to be ongoing for years and years and years, at some point in time it will end, whether it wants to or not, right? So we'll have the ellipse as the start and end. Dang it, I keep clicking on the wrong spot. And then the diamond represent a decision, right? And so it must have at least two branches. If it's a decision, it has to have at least two. It can have three or four or five or however many you want, right? But again, what's the purpose of this flowchart is again to show how things the steps in a process, right? And so if it gets too convoluted, then maybe we need to look at, can we break this down even further and then look at that? Because it's real easy to make something that's really, really confusing. All right. And then the other one is the flow lines. All right. And do you note this is not an input or an output? It just shows the sequencing that we go from one thing to another. All right. And I'm going to pause this for just a second. I'm going to try to find something. Okay, here we are. We're back. All right. Yeah. And so let me go to the next slide here. So if you look at this, what a mess. Only the U.S. government could make something like this. All right. Just to kind of give you a background on this, counterinsurgency is our method of dealing with insurgents in Afghanistan, Iraq, in the Middle East. And so this is the military's overall viewpoint of how to counter insurgent actions, right? And so, they use asymmetrical warfare, meaning that, um, they have small groups that move about. There's no large confrontations. Whatever they can do to disrupt the flow. And so, this is the U.S. military's grand scheme on how to counteract that. Okay, and so this slide is absolutely completely worthless, and I can't believe that they actually ever published this. But everybody who was deploying into theater in Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever, got briefed on this, and hey, this is what we're trying to do. And so this is just a completely worthless slide, right? Now it does show the different. So this really is more of a context diagram in that it shows the different organizations and how they interact. So it's basically showing the environment. But again, it's an absolutely worthless slide because there's so much going on that you don't make anything of it. And I can't. Yeah, this is absolutely something the U.S. government would make. All right, so. And let me back up now. So, the whole purpose of doing all these diagrams is to make something simpler and easier to understand. And if you create something like that, that is not simple. It's not easy to understand. It's a mess. Okay. And so if you wind up with something like this, then you missed the boat somewhere. All right. Moving on. All right. So. Flowcharts show the sequence of activities, critical functions, decisions are shown, and then this is at a much lower level, right? It shows detail. Whereas if we went back to that cross-functional process map, enter order. All right, well that doesn't really help me. It says okay, enter order. Well, what actually comprises that whole enter order? Well, that's where the flowchart comes in to show all the things that can happen in that enter order. All right, let's see. So again, the focus of this class is not so much software. It will be a little bit more towards the end, but so I do leave the software stuff in here. So yeah, all right, moving on. All right, so here is a simple example of take the customer order. So number one, we start. All right, and so. And this is not a complete one by any means, right? So we start here. We accept a payment. Is it credit or cash? All right. So here's our decision thing. All right. If it's credit, then we do what? We got to go over here and we've got to run through that. Now, is there more stuff in this? Absolutely, yeah. There's a whole lot more that can go into this, and we can make it as detailed as we want to. Again, just depending upon what it is that we're wanting to look at. Could we make this run card its own little flowchart? Yeah, absolutely. All right, because what's an example of that is that we've got the run card, so we could actually do. Let's talk about it. So we would start with card presented with card, swipe card. All right, and then so when we swipe card. What's going to happen next? Well, it depends on what type of point of sale system you had. It may be that it already has an amount already registered, and by swiping the card, it just says, okay, we're going to do this as a credit. But maybe we're in um, a mom and pop type place that doesn't have a high end point of sale, and so their credit card processing machine is actually separate from their point of sale. All right. So in that case, this would be much more detailed in that. Okay. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to swipe the card, and then it's going to be, hey, do you want to run this as debit or credit? All right. And so the customer is going to enter yes or no. All right, and then so what happens then? It's going to then check to see if the amount of money that yeah, and so we've got we already entered the amount of money, swipe the card, debit or credit, and then it's going to go out to the bank to say, is there enough money? All right, so that would be a decisional matrix. If there's not enough money, then what? It goes back to swipe again, because maybe it was an error. All right, you get where I'm going with this? And so you can make these, like this one's really kind of generic and it's really kind of broad, but we can go into much more detail with this if we need to. And again, it's all about what it is that we're trying to do. All right, where are we at on time? 11 minutes. Okay, good. All right. All right, so, here we are, again. All right, and then we obviously are going to finish this out with, hey, thank you, here's your order or whatever. All right. So it's a complete process from a start. All right, action, verb, decisional matrix. All right, if we have a decisional matrix, remember it has to have two things coming off of it, a minimum of two. All right, and then of course we're going to end with it's not necessarily a circle, but an ellipse. All right, let's see, here we go. Yeah, okay, so here's a little more detailed, just like I was talking about. So we take the customer's order, all right. We accept their credit card, right? Or, yeah, we'll say in this case it's a credit card. So credit card payment, all right, if it was a no, then that means it's a cash payment, all right? So we enter the order, give customer change and receipt, cups, whatever, and then we move on out. Now you notice that this goes back to our expediter, right? It doesn't actually exit from the whole process, whereas customer gets their order. Instead, all this is the order activity, and let me go back to that. Where to go? So here we are in this order activity, right? And so if this were the restaurant, this would be, the expediter or back kitchen, whatever. And so all it's showing is from here to here. All right, I hope this makes sense. All right, it doesn't go all the way out. All right, we just exit where it makes sense. All right, and so go back up here. So a credit card is presented. Yep, okay, so we're going to run the card. Was the credit card accepted? If it was no, all right, and in actuality, what's going to happen? We're not going to immediately refuse the order. We're going to do what? We're going to go back up here maybe one time to say, okay, we'll try it again. All right, and then, instead of refusing the order, be like, hey, do you have another way of paying? All right, but you can see how useful this is in that, we can use this as a training tool for new people, right? That, hey, here's what you do. These are the actions that you must take, and it's basically just laid out, and anybody can follow this, right? So if it was accepted, then what do we do? Well, we enter the order, give the customer a change and receipt, and then we go right back here to the expedite area or the actual meal prep area. All right. So, and I already kind of talked about this a little bit in that, how much detail? Well, it depends on what we're trying to do. All right. And like with all of these diagrams, we can scale it up or down to focus on the area that we're interested in learning about, right? And so the same thing holds true with these flowcharts. And I gave a real quick example of, the general one, and then, the much more detailed. All right. So again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what area you're trying to focus on. Let's see. All right. So in this entrance, treating customer courteously is very important to me. So I might begin with, greet the customer warmly. All right, as the starting point. All right, and then take customer order would be the second step. All right. So again, when we're doing this, and just like when we did our exercise on the board the other day, Monday, um, every person that does one of these is going to be different because you have different things that you're bringing to it. You're looking for different things. And so it will be different. And different is not necessarily wrong. If I had all of you do the exact same thing, there would be some similarities pretty much throughout, but they would all be slightly different. Again, because you're looking at things in a different aspect. All right. Okay, and then 4 and 7. So back over here, right? And I already kind of talked about this in that this is still pretty generic, right? It doesn't give me a whole lot of detail, right? And so I can put as much detail in there as I want. If I were going to use this as a training manual, right, then I'd have a little bit more detail in this because I want that person who's looking at this, because they obviously don't know what they're supposed to do, to be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, I see. They can follow the flow chart and see what's the next step. All right, and then a miracle occurs. This is going to be some of you on Friday. They're going to be looking at the quiz and being like, all right, so we have to show enough detail so that we're actually getting what it is that we're trying to do, but we don't want to have that counterinsurgency diagram either, right? Which just has so much detail it's just absolutely useless. All right. So I'm just going to add this a little bit because we will be doing some database stuff later on in the semester. The last couple weeks in the semester we'll be doing some structured query language. We'll be dealing with relational databases, and so I just went ahead and left this in to show that how this would relate. All right, and so let me go back up one. So the database symbol is this, I don't know what you want to call it, little box, I guess, little ellipse box. We'll call it an ellipse box. All right, and so here we've got our typical inner order activity, and then we've got this point of sale system. All right, and we've got it plugged in here at the inner order page or phase. All right. I think I've got some more detail in this, yeah. So this is basically the symbol for a database, and then this curved line represents an output. And again, you don't necessarily need to worry about it at this point. Just know that, hey, there is a different symbol for point of sale system, and then like this hang order on shoot, there is actually a symbol for that as well, because that, well, depends on where you're at. There is a document thing, so that if they print out a little receipt that gets hung on the rack back there for them to place that order, to fill that order. I think I took that out. So anyhow, you don't need to memorize this point of sale thing. I'm not going to ask you that. It's just, I'm bridging forward so that you understand that, all this stuff is interrelated. All right. Okay, so the flowchart shows a sequence. And so here it's not a general statement like inner order, but again, the level of detail is driven by what it is that you're trying to do, as we just talked about over the last couple slides. All right, but so when we get this inner order, we are breaking it out to some level of detail. That's the whole purpose of this flow chart, is to show what actually happens in that inter-order thing. Um, software tasks includes every major step the code must perform, and so that's kind of outside the scope of what we're trying to do here. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, and probably the most important slide or line out in this whole thing is that it all depends on the customer. It all depends on what we're trying to accomplish, right? If we're giving a training diagram that a new hire has a way to see, what exactly am I supposed to do, then it's going to have a pretty fair amount of detail, right? Because they need to be able to see all the different decisional matrices and all that for what they can do or what they should do, right? Because if we don't do that, then they're going to be lost. All right, so that's that one. Let me pull up this one. And all right, and this is for spring 2021. I think it is. Yeah, okay. All right, so all of the material that we've covered to date is testable on this. I don't believe in surprise questions, and I'm not going to ask you for intricate detail. That's not my goal. My goal is for you to have a broad understanding, and the key word there is understanding. All right, and so as you're taking the exam, this is all written, and so every question will ask you um, understanding type questions, right? And so if you don't know a key name for something, describe it. All right. I don't care whether you memorize a key name for something, right? With the exception of, there is one slide that needs to be memorized, period. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. I don't care for you to, I don't want you to memorize stuff because memorization is really useless. I can remember back in, I think it was sixth grade, and we had to memorize all these prepositions. And for what purpose? I mean, and I still remember some of them. But, what's the whole purpose of that? Nothing. Putting that in context, I have no idea why we did that. It was a completely worthless exercise, and you probably had to do it as well. All right. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So the lecture material that I just gave this morning is testable. All right. So flowcharts is definitely testable. All right. So in the early lectures, I did talk about, what is a system? I even talked about what's the most simplistic definition of a system. And there'll probably be a question related to that in that, what is a system? And so simple question, right? And if you can't think again of keywords, describe it to me. All right, this is that one that I want you to memorize. All right, I promise you, you will see this on every single quiz, test, whatever. This will be on there. All right, so basically we've got 4 different diagrams that we looked about. We've talked about the context diagram. We've talked about the cross-functional process map, otherwise known as the swim lane diagram. And we talked about the flow chart. All right. What we have not talked about is the state diagram. All right, but we will. We're going to talk about that probably next week. All right, so we need to be familiar with the context diagram. All right, what is it? What's it show? What's its purpose? All right, why do we do it? All right, the cross-functional process map, we probably spent quite a bit more time on it than we did anything else for good reason because it has a lot more detail to it. Excuse me one second. Okay, sorry about that. I got a frog in my throat. All right, so the cross-functional process map, there's a hierarchical structure to that, right? And so we look at different levels of that hierarchical structure, and we need to know what they are and how they relate to each other. All right. We also need to know the function of boundaries. What do boundaries do? What are their purpose? All right. Why do I care about a boundary? All right. Okay. So we talked about work, and we talked about value added, non-value added, and waste. You need to be familiar with those concepts, be able to give an example of them, um, and talk about who is actually paying for them. Where does the money directly come from to pay for each of those categories of work? Systems thinking, we had a lecture on systems thinking, which was, I don't know, 25 or 30 minutes. All right. What is it all about? All right, and I know that to my lecture, I gave the real nuts and bolts of it. I can break it down into, a real simple statement. All right, but I want you to do some thinking on this, and what does systems thinking do? All right, why do we do it, and then what's the underlying premise of it? Why do we care about this whole systems thinking thing? All right, so we also talked about Fermi. So you need to know who Fermi is. And we talked about Fermi problems. We actually walked through a couple different Fermi problems in class, and you did a group exercise on Fermi problems, right? So tell me about Fermi. You need to be able to tell me about Fermi, who he was, and then, what's the premise behind a Fermi problem. And yeah, okay. Moving on. That's it. Okay, so the test is worth 100. The quiz is worth 100 points, and um, I almost messed up. uh, so the test is worth 100 points. I don't remember exactly how many um, questions there are. I think there are 13 or 14. Um, Questions average from 5 to 10 points each. If it's something that's really simple, it's worth 5 points. There are a couple of them that are foundational thoughts, and so they're worth a little bit more, and even though they might be very, very simple. You'll have the full hour to do it. It is a written test. I'll hand it out, and you'll record your answers. Please, please, please write legibly. All right, take your time, write legibly. If anybody needs extended time for the quiz, all right, you can just send me an email, let me know that, hey, you need to do extended time. And I don't have anything right after lecture. And so if you need extended time, we can go back to my office and you can sit in the back and finish your quiz. Or if you've got something right after and you still need more time, I'll take your paper and then you can make an appointment to come back the next day. Well, that same day. I can't give you much time to finish off your quiz. Again, there are no surprises. This is actually the first quiz that you have with me, so most people do pretty well on the quizzes, but it's really apparent for the people who didn't actually go in and study. God bless. Have a great day, and hopefully the weather holds off and we can get this done on Friday. I will send out an email tomorrow, Thursday, to let you know what the plan is, whether we're actually going to do the quiz on Friday or whether we're going to shift it to Monday. It just really depends on the weather. Have a great day. Talk to you out.